All right, Steeler fans, it is Friday. It is the second half of the show, and Jeremy Betz is going to join us. And this is going to be a weird show. We don't have predictions or anything like that. The game has already happened. The last time we talked, the Steelers were getting ready for the Baltimore Ravens on the road, and now they've already lost 3 in a row, losing on Christmas Day. But Jeremy, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Well, Jeff, all I can say is it's beginning to look a lot like last year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just same song, another verse. It feels like when you get to, are the Steelers a contender? Are they not? That discussion seems like it comes up every year, and then they give us reason to maybe believe, and then reason to throw that all in the dirt. Feels like that's the way it's trending again this year.
Yes, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. Now, I do have to bring up your tweet.
Yes, please. I was in feelings this morning, Jeff. I'm sorry.
You were. I mean, my gosh, I don't want to read it because I'll let you explain it yourself.
Okay.
But I'm on Twitter, and it's right now that to me the Steelers are like a train wreck. You always you don't want to watch. I'm sick of it, but I have to follow it because now there's the rumors of infighting and the defensive side of the ball and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, so I'm checking Twitter, and all of a sudden Jeremy's tweet pops up, and I'm like, oh my gosh. This is some Andrew Wilbar stuff right here, but do you want to read the tweet?
No. Jeff, I had to look it up because I was not sure what I actually wrote in this tweet. No, it was definitely in my feelings. For some reason, I decided that I would pull up the highlights or lowlights of the Christmas Day game and just watch them again this morning, just to see if it was as bad as I thought it was yesterday, and it was. Now, let me say this. I did start off with a positive-ish on the tweet. I think the Steelers can still win a playoff game this year. I think they can still beat Cincinnati. And I think you've got to do two things. You got to figure out where the bleeding is on defense. And I mean, they were a great defense for the majority of the year. Everything's kind of fallen apart, and maybe that's just the level of competition they're playing, but they had some things figured out at some point this year. So I wouldn't be beyond them to figure it out again, especially against a mediocre couple teams here in a row that they'll have to play, unless for some reason they fall down in the standings and have to go to Baltimore or Buffalo. So, they have a chance pretty much evenly for the 5th or 6th seed at this point, either a trip to Houston or Baltimore. I think it's going to be Houston. And if that's the case, if you can stop the bleeding on defense and stop turning the ball over, I think you can still win that first round playoff game. So there's a positive there. But then, I always jump ahead to the offseason earlier than I should. And to me, the quarterback conversation is the dominant conversation in Pittsburgh since Roethlisberger's retirement, and probably before that too, because they haven't had a real succession in place, right, for Roethlisberger. We thought it was going to be Pickett. We thought, maybe it was just a hodgepodge of quarterbacks that had been brought in, and now you've got the two guys in house, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson. The talk had been that Russ was going to get an extension with the team before the fall off has happened. That's happened, and so basically my tweet was, this offseason you've got to keep pursuing the quarterback situation. And yes, I went there. I said, trade a defensive star if you have to do it. But my thought was maybe, pile up picks for the Pittsburgh draft 2026. Compete next year with Justin Fields and don't pay Russell Wilson a bunch of money. Maybe go trade for JJ McCarthy if the Vikings keep winning and they go to a conference championship with Sam Darnold or something like that. Do something, keep trying to find a quarterback, because right now you can't feel comfortable moving into 2025 with what you're seeing from Russ.
Yeah, I think it was the JJ McCarthy thing that I think I quote tweeted and said, or I responded. I don't think I quote. I was like, man, Jeremy's hitting the bottle early this morning. Why would the Vikings get rid of their first round pick just because Sam Darnold looked good this season? I don't know. I understand your premise, and I agree with your premise. The Steelers do have to continue to try and find the next quarterback, even though Mike Tomlin has said, I only care about trying to win now. And so that's interesting. And he's not so much concerned about the long-term future, more he's just focused on trying to get this team the best they can be right now. But let's not go to the offseason. We're going to have a long time to talk about that.
Yeah.
The whole first half of the show, I talked about I tried to answer the question, where do the Steelers go from here? And how it's a really weird part of the season for this team, not just because they lost 3 games, because they've already locked up a playoff spot. Also because, really, do you rest players in week 18? All this stuff. Like, where do the Steelers go from here, in your opinion?
Well, I think that they're going to want that 5th seed over having to go to Baltimore or Buffalo. So I don't know. I think they're going to have to try to win this game against Cincinnati. But there is something to be said. Cam Hayward, he came back in the game, but he was a little banged up in the Chiefs game. You've got some guys still coming back from injuries. There's something to be said for, okay, we've locked up our spot. We're going to have to play somebody as a road team at this point probably anyway, so let's just load up for the playoff game. But it's division rival Cincinnati. I'm sure the Steelers would love to end their chances potentially at getting in the playoffs as well. I think a lot of that's going to be determined by what happens on Saturday, Sunday of this week. If Cincinnati beats Denver and the Colts were to lose to the Giants, then Cincinnati's in if they win and the Chiefs beat Denver next week. So that's going to play into it. If the Chargers somehow lose, then basically you've locked up the 5th seed no matter what you do, because you have a win over them. Or if Denver and the Chargers both lose, you have the head-to-head over those guys. So you've locked up the 5th seed if they both lose anyway. So there's something to be said for this week. We need to watch this week play out before making a final decision if you're the Steelers and if you're Steelers fans on what you would like to see. But it is kind of a tough spot to be in. But, in reality, it's the playoffs for Pittsburgh. That's what matters. It's winning those games. So whatever it takes to do that, if it results in a win on Wild Card Weekend, I'll be down for it.
Okay, so I get you're absolutely right with the resting of the players. Also, I think when you think about where do they go from here from the team morale perspective is what really has me. Like I talked about the train wreck. It's not the performance on the field. It's that people are almost calling players out for, you've got Cam Hayward saying 10 out of 11 guys are doing their job. Who's the one guy? Some are saying it's Cam Sutton. Some are saying it's Minkah Fitzpatrick. Minkah Fitzpatrick's refusing to talk to the media and all this stuff. I don't care about that per se, but I'm asking, where do they go in this case? Where do they go from here in terms of this extended break? How do we get this thing back on track and get these players to be one again? Because they're not one right now. They're a divided group.
Yeah. First of all, my opinion on what Cam Hayward said was that he was just saying that the line is very thin between good defense and bad defense. If 10 guys do their job and one guy does not, then you're screwed. So I didn't necessarily take that to mean, okay, there's 10 of us that are hustling and busting our butts out here and one guy slacking on defense. I didn't take it to mean that. Could it mean that? I guess, but I just have trouble seeing who's not giving 100%. Maybe guys are out of position because they're not good players. Cam Sutton might not be a great player. Beanie Bishop might not be a great player. You've got James Pierre out there right now, for goodness sake. So, that could play into it, but it kind of took me at more as we've got to get on the same page, all 11 of us on defense, or this is going to keep happening. I did think that maybe coaching was called out a little bit by Deshaun Elliott. That made sense to me, that maybe that they have been voicing some reasons or potential options to fix things, and coaching staff's just not willing to make those changes to this point. But I do think the Steelers are going to have to, as you do every Friday night or every Friday show, have a heart-to-heart and really come to grips with where they're at. Because, like I said, we've seen highs from this team that make you think maybe they can walk into Baltimore or Kansas City and pull out a surprising win. But the lows over these last 3 games have been so bad that you kind of feel that they're maybe a tier or two below that now. But I think that there's the vision of what this team could be is still there. You've just got to dig deep and find it. I don't know how they do that. that's on guys who are paid much more than I am. Mike Tomlin, highly compensated for these moments right here. Get out and do something about it. I don't think it needs to be a quarterback switch. I don't think it's anything drastic, but you've got to do something to where the little adjustments that offenses have made over the course of these last 3 weeks don't keep killing you. You've got to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be tough. The Bengals, unless they're out of it, are still going to be a tough opponent. I would expect another high-scoring affair, just like the last time these two teams played, but we will talk about that more next week. A last question before we go to some AFC North picks, because the rest of the AFC North does still have to play in Week 17. When you think about players that could be gone, and you think about it, I think there's a lot of pride with NFL players. Players like Najee Harris, Cam Sutton, Dante Jackson, DeMonte KZ, James Pierre, and hell, even these two quarterbacks, all slated to be unrestricted free agents after this season. How much do you think that plays into the fact of, this final week and then even into the playoffs in terms of they're looking at not just an off season, but they're looking at who am I playing for next year?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's a motivating factor for them to play well.
Yeah.
But I think the focus would need to be on this team this season. And that's always been, Mike Tomlin's message. But I mean, these guys are human. They have their careers ahead of them. Their lives are more impacted, by off-season happenings than Mike Tomlin's will be, than by us as fans, obviously. So there's definitely going to be some consideration of that fact. But my biggest thing that I'd love to see from these guys is just a narrowing of focus, and I think that that's what needs to happen. If I had to just label one thing where I would say, and I don't know how you fix it, but where you say, guys, we need to really come together here and fix this. I think it's the focus. It's got to be an attention to detail, like we were hearing about early on this season, like we saw at points throughout the year. It just feels like the details are lacking for Pittsburgh, and guys are, missing a play here and there, missing an assignment here and there that blows something up. And when you start getting into January football, you're talking about teams who can take advantage of all those things. So these guys need to focus. The unrestricted free agents, the restricted free agents, the guys who have a lot to play for over the next couple of weeks, I hope they come out and play like it for sure.
They need to. Mike Tomlin's talking about changes. I don't know what the hell's going to change. Like, there's not going to be any sweeping change. It's going to be, they're not going to change quarterbacks. I said that in the first half. I'll say it again. Like, some people are like, oh, it's Justin Fields' time. Nope. Maybe that's the Justin Fields package more often if he's healthy, but he's not even healthy, I don't think. So, I don't know. All right, let's go to AFC North picks. Let's talk on Saturday. The Broncos go to the Bengals. The Bengals are 3.5-point favorites in this one. I think this is going to be a really good game. And I think Denver's defense is ready to step up. Can they make enough plays on offense, though? That's the question, Jeremy. How do you see this one going?
So, I mean, this game's really interesting because you got two teams. One has, an eye on a playoff spot that they've been kind of on track for, that 7th seed all season long. That's the Denver Broncos. You got a Cincinnati Bengals team that's holding on to every sliver of hope. They've got a lot to play for, and they're going to be motivated to come out here too. I think the interesting thing about this game is the coaching matchup, because you've got two head coaches who are offensive minded, who are relying on other people to figure out these defenses. And the Broncos defense was good all year, and then over the last few weeks, they've kind of fallen off, much like the Steelers have. You're starting to see offenses take advantage of them in the run game, and then play action pass down the field. The Browns did it. The Chargers did it. So how can they right the ship there? And then the Bengals defense has been atrocious all season. So this to me has all the makings of a shootout. We talked about Steelers Bengals maybe in a couple weeks or being a shootout there. I think this one is like that as well. I actually like the Bengals in this game. Denver's going to have to figure something out on the defensive side of the ball to shut down Burrow enough times for Bo Nix and company to get things done. I just don't know if it happens. I think the Bengals have a little bit more to play for. I think the Chiefs are probably going to rest their players next week, and Denver can lock up a playoff spot with a win over a resting Chiefs team. So Bengals have a little bit more to play for this week. I'm taking the Bengals.
I think the Broncos can win this football game. It's just a matter of can the Bengals, they've been winning, but they've been sloppy as hell doing it. Their defense is getting takeaways thanks to playing some really bad teams. If Bo Nix doesn't turn the ball over, I like the Broncos' chances here. I'll take the Broncos getting points and not even take them on the money line. That's plus 145. I'll take that. And let's end the Bengals. Let's end their season. Let's do it early. I'm out. I'm all for that. All right, the game that means nothing, but to some people, Dolphins at Browns. Browns are getting 6.5 points in this one. The Dolphins still are clinging to hopes of a postseason berth. They're not mathematically eliminated. The Browns, well, DTR is starting again. So what do you think about this game?
I don't know. This one's interesting because Mike McDaniel's kind of been on the hot seat, not necessarily lose his job, but like, why can't they field a competitive team when they're playing teams with a winning record? Why can't they get over that hump? And I know Tua has been hurt this season and last year. It feels like Tua's hurt every year, right? So the excuses, or that's not an excuse. That's something to expect at this point. And then you've got on the other side, Kevin Stefanski, who, I mean, there's been rumblings that he's coaching for his job after, was it back-to-back years where he won Coach of the Year? It's kind of crazy, but he's got a third-string quarterback that he's playing, and that team's just been a mess this whole entire year, from Deshaun Watson to Jameis Winston, now to DTR. So this might have more to do with the coaching staffs than anything else. Who's going to be sticking around? Who's going to have a job next year? Who's going to be, primed and loaded for the future? You've got Myles Garrett coming out talking about, if I'm going to sign a long-term deal with this team, I want to know that they've got a plan to compete right away. And so there's rumblings of discontent on both sides. Tyreek Hill with the Dolphins. For this game specifically, I think the Dolphins' explosiveness, having more of their starters in play, I think the Browns, having to play DTR and no Nick Chubb, being a little bit banged up on both sides of the ball, this leans more towards the Dolphins for me. I like them to cover, and I like them to win the game.
Yeah, I like the Dolphins here too. I think that it's Cleveland's probably thinking more about, let's try and get a higher draft slot. Let's try and figure out a way to figure out getting some team. They're 3-12. They're in the mix for
the 1 seed or for the first overall pick.
Yeah. And top 10, definitely a top 10 pick. I mean, so we'll see. But all right, Jeremy, what do you have coming up for Steel Curtain Network?
Yeah, so working on an article, sticking with the negative theme, Jeff. I'm writing about how low could it go for the Steelers this season, and more from the perspective of like who has a lot at stake here. Could somebody lose their job if the Steelers do not win another game the rest of the season? Is there, who's got a lot in the balance here? So that's kind of more where I'm going at with it than predicting the schedule or something simple like that. But so tune in for that. Check out the Steelers Fix. Andrew Wilbar covered for me while I was driving home. He did a solo show for the Fix, so check that out. And then check out the Draft Dynasty podcast. We're going to talk some quarterbacks there for the league. And so stay tuned. And hopefully the Steelers can pick up a win here one of these next 2 weeks, hopefully both of them.
That's right. And we'll be here to talk about it, but back to our regular schedule. So Jeremy, enjoy your weekend, man. We'll talk next week.
Have a good one, Jeff.